Today on Here for the Right Reasons, we break down Matt James's book revelations as he opens up to us about why he didn't include Chris Harrison in his book.
I hate beating a dead horse, and everything's played out how it's played out, and there's no need to go back on it. On something that we've talked so much about.
Plus, Bachelor in Paradise star Tammy Lee gets emotional about being done with the franchise.
I'm just going to finally put my foot down and stop being used, because I'm not a secondary person. I'm a primary person in my life. I put myself first, and it was time for me to stop catering to them.
And Jojo and Jordan reveal baby details, and Hannah Brown talks struggle with fame. We've got that plus so much more on today's Here for the Right Reasons. Hey guys, Christina Garibaldi here with Us Weekly senior editor Sarah Heron, and welcome to another big week of Bachelor news. Sarah, there's a lot to actually get to this week.
There was. We had some good interviews, and Matt's book came out, and we're getting closer and closer to the Bachelorette coming back. Things are happening. It's always fun.
Moving right along. All right, well, before we get into the news, let's see what you guys have to say about last week's show.
This was Tracy, I believe, talking about Chris and Alana. She just said BIP is a competition show. How long can you last? My opinion has not changed about these two.
Interesting. Did your opinion change about them after you talked to them?
A little bit. I think they got a little bit screwed, and I think their analysis of kind of feeling like they were being bullied by the people who are more popular in the franchise, I think that's definitely accurate because we saw Brennan and Piper didn't get kicked off the beach. So I think that's true. But I definitely think, I don't know. There's something about him, but I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah. All right. Well, Joan says Marissa missed some big clues that he was not for her. I guess so, but she also kind of admitted that she saw some of these red flags, but decided to kind of ignore them and maybe hope that things would change once they left the beach, but I guess not.
Yeah, Demi Burnett also did a podcast recently, kind of going off about Riley, which I know she said some shady stuff about him before. So I think there's just so much more to this story that I don't know if we're ever going to know.
Yeah, totally. All right, well, let's move on to our Bachelor news. And Bachelor Nation took over Stagecoach Festival once again. Blake Hortzman DJ'd, and in the crowd was Hannah Brown, Amanda Stanton, JoJo Fletcher, Katie Thurston, Thomas Jacobs. The list goes on and on and on. This should just be renamed Bachelor Festival, because it's ever since Blake talked about this on Bachelor in Paradise, it's where everybody goes.
I know. And I have to say, shout out to Blake for getting to DJ after all of that stuff that went down. It's kind of nice, to see the come up there. And a lot of old school, not old school, but not, those names were people who haven't necessarily been on the show in the most recent seasons. So that was interesting. And Chris and Alana were with Blake and his crew. So I thought that was interesting too, because they were kind of talking to me on the podcast about how they don't have Bachelor Nation friends, but I guess they have some.
Interesting, but yeah, always a good time. And it seemed like a lot of people enjoyed Blake's set. So good for him. Like you said,
good for him. Jojo was at Stagecoach with her BFF Becca Tilley, but before she was there, she was with me in New York City and her fiance Jordan Rogers talking about their wedding and baby plans. Jordan told us it's kind of been coming up a little bit more recently. Everyone that will be my groomsmen, except for one, has had a child in the last calendar year. We're at that time in our life where we're like, oh gosh, we've got to have a kid tomorrow. But also, I don't think we'll wait a long time, but it might not be right away. Jojo noted it could be the next 1 or 2 years. So basically, they are talking babies. The wedding is in a couple weeks. It's in May. So it wouldn't be shocking if around a year after that, we see a pregnant Jojo.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, they were supposed to get married 2 years ago. So they probably wanted, they have been enjoying, I guess, quote unquote, newlywed life for the past couple years. So I guess they're on a fast track to babies. They're still one of my favorite Bachelor Nation couples. I love them.
Oh, same. And in person, they're so sweet and so beautiful. It's ridiculous.
So
and
they seem babies.
Yeah, they seem very genuine. And yeah, they were supposed to get married in May 2020. They relocated to Puerto Rico. So they want to raise their kids in Puerto Rico, and they want to get on it because those 2 years that they were going to, enjoy being married, like you said, have happened already. So
right. So they permanently live in Puerto Rico now. And I always see them working on their flip house, but I guess they're moved down there. Good for them.
And her brothers live in Puerto Rico too. And one of them has a kid. So they see how they're living the life. And I think as far as I know, for the foreseeable future, they are going to be in Puerto Rico.
Good for them. Awesome. All right. Well, Hannah Brown revealed that she turned to alcohol as a way to deal with her sudden fame and the anxiety that came with being in the public eye. She said in an interview with Tamron Hall, "I'd never really been a drinker before, before and I was on TV like every Monday for an entire year and didn't know how to handle how my life had so publicly been displayed. I have always lived with a smile on my face and, tried to pretend like everything was okay. But then when I was at home by myself, the only thing that was really giving me comfort was a glass of wine. Now, she previously did open up about this in her memoir, God Bless This Mess, writing that she started drinking in May of 2020. She said, I started drinking at 11 a.m. and never really stopped. I mean, it has to be like super difficult to, one morning you wake up and nobody knows your name and then the next morning everybody does. So it's got to be a bit of a jarring experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, relying on a glass of wine feels like a familiar thing. And then, it's a slippery slope, and especially being on a show like that where everyone's talking about you and everyone's judging you and feels like they know you. It's a super, super intense experience and really interesting to see Hannah's journey post show. And the book obviously was like had a lot of stuff in it. And then now she's kind of selectively doing a little bit more press. She did the journal. This is interesting. I'm always curious to see where former leads go with their post-show journey.
Yes, definitely. Well, speaking of former leads, you spoke to Matt James, but before we get to the interview, we have to talk about some of these revelations, right?
Yes. Life after the final rose proved to be more challenging than expected for Matt James. The former Bachelor is sharing his side of the story in his new book, First Impressions, Off-Screen Conversations with the Bachelor on Race, Family, and Forgiveness. In it, he discusses why he was disappointed with his premiere episode, saying that producers crafted his story. He talks about finding out about Rachel's scandal and how divisive their relationship became. And it really is like a memoir in the sense that it gives you a lot of backstory about Matt's family, growing up with a single mother, his dad being, in and out of his and his brother's life, having a white grandfather who he and his brother didn't feel accepted them the way they accepted their white cousins, since they're obviously biracial. His brother's own stints in and out of jail, their relationship, and Matt growing up as a biracial person in then going to Wake Forest, which had a primarily white, student body. And then it gets to the Bachelor stuff, and it's pretty clear that one of his big points in the book is for the reader to know that all these things he spoke about on the show, and none of it aired. And instead what aired was something that, I've declared the cattiest group of girls of all time. And I don't know if that's true, but what I saw was not, anything about race and forgiveness and family. It was a lot about, I can't remember what, but I just remember I felt like they hated each other.
Right. No, that's so true. I remember us talking throughout the season being like, we know nothing about Matt. Like, this is just concentrating on Queen Victoria and all of the cattiness that is going on with that group of people. And I really do feel like they did him a disservice. Like, it was not a good season at all. And then on top of it, you had that scandal with Rachel. And I thought it was so interesting that he said that they were actually together on After the Final Rose, and he didn't really want to give Bachelor Nation, any more of his story than he needed to. So he kind of just did the bare minimum. He just wanted to show up to After the Final Rose and kind of be done with it. And I don't blame him.
Yeah, that's also why he said he grew the beard, because it was like his way of being like, you guys created this image and I was just like America's Bachelor. And he revealed he didn't know he was the first Black Bachelor until after he accepted the job. He just assumed there had been one before, which shocked me and was the first question I asked him. You can hear the whole interview on the podcast. I was like, what? Like, I don't get it. And he was just like, listen, it was a whirlwind thing. I went from, Claire Crawley calling me out on Twitter to them giving me the gig to then the conversations of what this really meant. And I guess they just assumed I would know. Right. And it was obviously, a crazy time in our country with everything going on with Corona and Black Lives Matter. And and I think the Rachel stuff, it definitely gives you a little, he doesn't share everything. Like, you can tell they're protecting stuff, which you, I guess, have to understand to some degree. But the After the Final Rose stuff is interesting. They had broken up, but then they were still talking, and they made a point to say, we're not giving the show anything else that they can really run with. And it's so shocking to me just because I remember watching that being like, oh, they are never going to talk again. And us, for sure.
And then I thought it was interesting. He said, I think, I don't know if he wrote this or he said it to you, or afterwards they walked out hand in hand from that After the Final Rose segment. So like they, wanted to work on their relationship a little bit more. And it was shortly after that they got back together. An interesting read. And then you also sat down with him too, right?
Yes. And something that he didn't get into the book, it's a quick mention, but is the Chris Harrison of it all. He didn't talk about the Rachel Lindsay, Chris Harrison interview. All he said was in the book was like, the host gave one of the worst interviews in the show's history. Like it was like piled on to the reason of the kind of February 2021 madness. But I asked him about why he didn't include it in the book, and here's what he had.
I feel like there's a note in it saying it's not worth it to rehash what happened with X, contestant or whatever, which I understand. But with Rachel, and obviously you guys still being together, how did you navigate what to include, what you felt was important to share your story and explain, and what was like not even worth going down?
I just wanted to provide context for anybody who had no idea what was going on, because, as someone who lives on social media and is a young person that has all the different platforms, like a lot of people going into the AFR didn't realize that we had broken up because they're not on Instagram, Twitter, whatever. So like just providing context was the means of talking about our relationship and it being collaborative. So having conversations with Rachel about what how I was gonna put our story together. And in terms of like rehashing things with other relationships, like that's on somebody else. Like that is on somebody else to do. Like that's not I'm not gonna be the person to be like, I'm calling out the franchise for like that's petty. And it's gonna come across as petty because like it's come and gone, and where you're at is where you're at. So I didn't have any interest in that. I just wanted to give context to what I went through and what we went through, and there had to be a little bit of that in there. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like that would answer this question, but you mentioned a conversation you had on night one with the host, but you don't use Chris Harrison's name. You don't get into any of the stuff with Rachel Lindsay. Was that a conscious decision of just like not something that I needed to get involved in? I mean, even at the time, like, I feel like you kind of just tried to just get through it is how it read to me. Yeah. Obviously I wasn't there, but
no, I just felt like we spent enough time talking about that stuff. It's like, I hate beating a dead horse, and like, everything's played out how it's played out. And like, there's no need to go back on it, on something that we've talked so much about, because unfortunately those type of conversations overshadowed, context that I would have liked to have been applied to the season that would give people, that would have answered a bunch of questions I had, things that I talked about and discussed and went into in depth in my dates and on group dates and on one-on-ones that never aired. So I didn't want to take any more time to talk about that stuff. I wanted to focus on themes that I felt that could really help people. And I don't think that going back on that would be any help to anybody. So were
you disappointed he didn't include this in the book?
I was surprised. I don't know why. I feel like he hasn't really spoken specifically about his thoughts on Chris Harrison. And I think he has an interesting perspective because he loves Rachel. He knows Rachel. He loved and knew Rachel at the time and loves and knows her even more now. And I think it would have been interesting to hear what he thought about it looking back. But I also think he just, as much as this book is about The Bachelor, he really is trying to distance himself from The Bachelor. And I think he knows that would be something that would really get a lot of attention. But I don't know. I look forward to the day of hearing unfiltered thoughts about that scandal. I don't know.
Yeah, I would love to know what they really think about it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you also caught up with Bachelor in Paradise star Tammy Lee. She made headlines back in February as she declared via Instagram stories, if you're not their favorite, as it's very clear, you are treated like secondhand dog crap and they don't care about you or your value or your worth. This was, of course, talking about Bachelor Nation in general. So you caught up with her to find out exactly why she said this. Take a look.
And what for you, because I know you did release a video on Instagram saying that you were done with the franchise. And I want to ask you about that. I know you don't want to say too much, but just explain for the Us Weekly listeners, maybe what was behind that and why you did it. But also looking back, do you regret doing that? Are you happy to kind of start getting things off your chest? Like, how has it felt? But can you just explain a little bit?
People think that I'm just like have this vendetta against this franchise now. I really don't. I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful to have been a part of it. I think I wouldn't have traded it for anything in this world, but it's the frustrations that I was having. A lot of people do, and they just don't vocalize it because they're so afraid. What happened to me is that I just had it with them, and I am very vocal and opinionated. And I was going to let my viewers know like what's going on. instead of stay quiet. I'm not a person that stays quiet, as we clearly know. And I just got really upset. Would I have done it differently all over again? Absolutely. I think I should have, worked through my emotions and then said something. But I was so hurt and upset at that time. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. I didn't say much, really, even in the small clip that I did post, and I still don't talk about it now. So no one will ever know the truth behind it. I mean, maybe one day, but I'm just going to finally put my foot down and stop being used, because I'm not a secondary person. Like, I'm a primary person in my life. I put myself first, and it was time for me to stop catering to them. Yeah. So that's the way that I felt about it. And a lot of people supported me, surprisingly, which made me so happy. Like, I remember I was flying the next day and I'm like crying at the airport because I'm reading all these messages. Like, I didn't expect it to be like that, because I'm like, oh, everyone in this franchise hates me anyways. Like, what did I have to lose? Nothing. So yeah, I'm happy to just give myself some distance with the franchise for now. Who knows if I'll be back? Who knows what's going to happen in the future? But it's kind of like a toxic relationship. I just need to give my space right now, and maybe we can work on things in the future.
Yeah. So seems to be done with this franchise.
Yeah. I mean, Tammy is she's being cryptic, but not cryptic at all, kind of implying she was in talks to be the Bachelorette or have some sort of show with producers, and how they, allegedly took it away from her. But I think she's scared to totally say what's going on, but you can see it in her, she gets emotional talking about race in the franchise. And it's just a bizarre thing that we can't relate to. And it's a wild, I don't know where the show's going to go from here, but it's interesting to hear people like Matt and Tammy kind of share their perspective.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, let's check in to see what Bachelor Nation caught our attention on social media this week. Mine went to Becca Kufrin because she has wrapped up the Bachelor Live tour. She posted a bunch of photos with her and Thomas, and said that's a wrap. It was a long 2+ years in the making, but they accomplished Bachelor Live on stage. So it's a nice little wrap up. They brought their corgis on stage, their dogs. She toasted with some champagne, and that's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Goodbye, Bachelor Live on stage. I'm so glad I got to witness it. I would be shocked if they did it again, but who am I to say?
Crazier things have happened. What caught your attention?
Mine wasn't technically on social, although I'm sure there's going to be plenty of photos on social now, but both Tayshia and Dale were at the same Met Gala party in New York City. And the fact that we have Bachelor, it was an after party. It wasn't like they were on the steps of the Met, but we have Bachelorette alum, getting into the Met Gala, and Dale and Tayshia, I wonder if they've ever really interacted, because, technically it's season 16, both technically season 16 alum, even though they didn't share the screen.
Right. Oh my God. Imagine if I know, just because they took a picture together doesn't mean they're dating. But imagine.
Yes, I know.
Would make a good looking couple. Right. All right. Well, Sarah, who's on the podcast this week?
My full interview with Matt is on the podcast this week. It was really good. I think, if I do say so myself, he talked a lot about what's in the book and about Rachel and what's next for those two.
It is. It's a great interview. Make sure everybody takes a listen. Keep commenting, keep subscribing, and we will see you guys next week. Bye.